today I'll be presenting the topic of the impact of debt financing on firms' evidence from 5 countries. And this study examines how changes in debt financing affect future operating performance, abnormal return, operating volatility, and stock high cash risk across 5 countries. We have 3 sets of hypotheses. First, we look at aggregate debt effect. Second, we disaggregate debt by maturity to see if short-term debt and long-term debt differ. And third, test whether analyst coverage strengthen or weaken the debt's effect. Independent variable, we're going to use changes in total debt, short-term debt, and long-term debt. And moderating variable is analyst coverage. And these are all the control variables. And let's move on to the results. Starting with H1A, we find that debt reduces operating performance. And this is contrary to our hypothesis. Rather than disciplining manager as Jensen predicts, debt impose financial burden through interest and principal obligation. The effect on abnormal return is significant only in Thailand, suggesting investors elsewhere do not place sufficient weight on that signal. For H1C, results are mixed as debt stabilized operation in some countries but destabilized in some countries as well, which reflecting differences in institutional environment across the region. And finally, for H1D, creditor monitoring constraint information holding effectively only in Malaysia. Moving on to H2, first one, we find that both short-term debt and long-term debt reduce operating performance through financial burden applied regardless of maturity. For short-term debt, this is contrary to our hypothesis as frequent creditor monitoring was expected to improve performance. And for long-term debt, the negative effect is consistent with moral hazard argument where infrequent monitoring reduces managerial incentive to operate efficiently. And next, for abnormal return, only Thailand reacts significantly and negatively to short-term debt, while long-term debt generate no significant market reaction anywhere. And next, for operating volatility, short-term debt tends to destabilize operation in Thailand and Indonesia through frequent financing pressure, while providing some stability discipline in Singapore. And for long-term debt, on the other hand, stabilize operation in Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia by allowing firms to plan over longer horizon without refinancing pressure. And for stockpile cash risk, short-term debt reduce cash risk in Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia, but increases in Thailand and Singapore, where refinancing pressure pushes managers to conceal bad news. For long-term debt, infrequent monitoring allows managers to accumulate hidden bad news over time with significant effect only in Indonesia. And for H3, we start with first one, operating performance analysis does not strengthen debt's disciplinary role as predicted. Instead, it amplifies the negative performance effect across most countries. And for abnormal return, analyst coverage has no significant moderating effect in any country. For operating volatility, analysis reduces volatility only in Thailand, suggesting dual pressure promotes operational consistency. And for cash risk, analysis worsens it in Philippines rather than constraining information holding. Analyst scrutiny compounds financial pressure, pushing manager to conceal bad news. When disaggregates by maturity, for operating performance, analyst coverage amplify the negative effects of both short-term and long-term debt across most markets through the same pressure amplification mechanism. And for abnormal return, analyst coverage help in Thailand by reducing perceived financial burden of short-term debt, shifting market reaction positively. However, it worsened market reaction in Singapore and Philippines, where analyst coverage amplify investor awareness of short-term debt. For operating volatility, analyst coverage reduces volatility only in Thailand for short-term and long-term debt. Combination of debt pressure and analyst scrutiny promotes operational consistency only in Thailand. For cash risk, analyst coverage worsen cash risk in Malaysia and Philippines for short-term debt through frequent refinancing pressure combined with analyst scrutiny incentivize information concealment rather than disclosure. For long-term debt, analyst coverage reduces cash risk only in Indonesia twofold, where it compensates for infrequent creditor oversight. Thank you for listening.